Some rock stars are famous for their music, and others are infamous for their behavior. The tales of their antics are whispered about for years, but what's real and what's fake? Get ready, because we're about to reveal the truth, including one story about a musician who had to be brought back from the brink of death in a hotel room. 1. Keith Moon's waterlogged Rolls-Royce. Let's start with Keith Moon, the legendary drummer for The Who. To put it mildly, Keith was known for his wild and destructive behavior. He wasn't just a drummer, he was a human hurricane. The guy had a reputation for wrecking hotel rooms that was almost as famous as his drumming skills. One of the most famous stories about him involves his 21st birthday party back in 1967. The tale goes that Keith celebrated a little too hard at a Holiday Inn in Flint, Michigan, and ended the night by driving a luxury car, a Lincoln Continental, or a Rolls-Royce, depending on who you ask, straight into the hotel's swimming pool. So, is this story real? The answer is a big, loud yes. According to multiple accounts, including the biography of The Who's manager, the party was absolute chaos. There was a gigantic cake, and a food fight broke out that covered everyone and everything in frosting. As things got out of hand, Keith decided to make a grand exit. He got into a car, released the handbrake, and let it roll right into the deep end of the pool. The thing nobody tells you is the aftermath. The police were called, and Keith, in his underwear and covered in cake, was arrested. The band was banned from all Holiday Inn hotels for life. It was an expensive night, costing the band tens of thousands of dollars in damages, which would be like hundreds of thousands today. Destroying a fancy car is one thing, but what about a rock star who was famous for hurting himself on stage as part of the show? Our next story is about a man who took performance art to a whole new level of danger. 2. Iggy Pop's glass-covered body roll. Now let's talk about Iggy Pop, the frontman of the Stooges and the godfather of punk rock. Iggy Pop is famous for his stage presence, which is less about singing and more about pure, untamed energy. He writhes, he jumps, he climbs on things. He basically does whatever he wants. Back in the early 1970s, his performances were legendary for being unpredictable and, frankly, pretty dangerous. One of the most lasting rumors about him is that he would regularly roll around in broken glass during his shows. This sounds like something made up to make him seem tough, but believe it or not, this one is absolutely true. It wasn't just a one-time thing either. One of the most famous incidents happened in 1973 at a club in New York City. During the show, in a fit of wild energy, Iggy threw himself onto a pile of broken glass on the stage. He cut himself up pretty badly, but he just kept on performing, with blood mixing with his sweat as he moved around. What many overlooked is that this wasn't just for shock. For Iggy, it was about breaking down the wall between the performer and the audience. He wanted the show to feel real and raw. After that New York show, he actually had to be taken to the hospital to get stitched up. It was a new kind of performance, and it cemented his legacy as a true original. Iggy Pop hurting himself was part of his act, but our next rock star's actions weren't part of any show, and they ended up hurting a lot of other people and causing a full-blown riot. 3. Axl Rose and the St. Louis Riot. Axl Rose, the lead singer of Guns N' Roses, has always been known for his powerful voice and his very short temper. The band was one of the biggest in the world in the late 80s and early 90s, playing in massive stadiums to thousands of screaming fans. But with that fame came a lot of pressure and a lot of drama. In July of 1991, the band was playing a show near St. Louis, Missouri. The concert was going along fine until Axl noticed something in the crowd he didn't like. A fan near the front was taking pictures with a camera, which was against the venue's rules. Axl pointed out the fan to security, but when they didn't act fast enough, he decided to take matters into his own hands. He yelled, "Well, thanks to the lame butt security, I'm going home," and then dove headfirst into the crowd. He went right for the fan, grabbed the camera, and then got pulled back on stage by his crew. But he wasn't done. He slammed his microphone on the stage and walked off, ending the concert right then and there. The crowd of over 15,000 people went from cheering to furious in a matter of seconds. And this rumor is 100% true. The angry crowd rioted, tearing up seats, breaking equipment, and causing chaos. The result was around 50 people injured and over $200,000 in damages to the venue. Axl was later arrested and charged with inciting a riot. Losing your temper in front of thousands is bad. But our next rock star had such a big ego and was so hard to work with that he actually got fired by another music legend, Little Richard, before he even became famous. 4. Jimi Hendrix getting fired by Little Richard. Before Jimi Hendrix became the guitar god we all know him as, he was a young, struggling musician trying to make a name for himself. In the mid-1960s, he got a huge break when he was hired to play guitar in the touring band for one of the founding fathers of rock and roll, the flamboyant and energetic Little Richard. You would think this would be a match made in heaven, two musical geniuses on one stage. But the reality was very different. The rumor is that Little Richard fired Jimi Hendrix for being too good and for stealing the spotlight. This story is completely true. You see, Little Richard was the star of his show, and he demanded everyone's full attention. He had strict rules for his band members. They had to wear the same uniform, they had to have the same haircut, and they were not allowed to upstage him. But Jimi Hendrix was, well, Jimi Hendrix. He had his own unique style, both in his playing and his fashion. He would wear flashy clothes and play the guitar with a wild flair that the audience loved. Little Richard saw this as a direct challenge. On top of that, Hendrix was often late for the tour bus. After several warnings, Little Richard had enough. He and his brother fired Jimi from the band in 1965. In the end, it was for the best, as it pushed Hendrix to form his own band and become a superstar. Getting fired from a job is one thing. It's a whole other level of bizarre to do something on stage that is so disgusting it becomes one of the most famous stories in rock history, which brings us to the Prince of Darkness himself. 5. Ozzy Osbourne and the Bat Incident. Ozzy Osbourne, the lead singer of Black Sabbath and a hugely successful solo artist, has a reputation for being one of the wildest men in music. His whole persona is built around darkness and madness. Over the years, there have been tons of crazy stories about him, but one stands out above all the rest. The legend says that during a concert in 1982, a fan threw a bat on stage, and Ozzy, thinking it was a rubber toy, picked it up and bit its head off. As gross and unbelievable as it sounds, this story is absolutely, positively true. It happened on January 20th, 1982, in Des Moines, Iowa. During his show, someone in the audience threw a real live bat onto the stage. Ozzy, who has admitted he was not in a clear state of mind at the time, saw the bat lying there, stunned by the lights. He picked it up and, in a moment of pure shock rock insanity, bit into it. He said he immediately realized it was not a rubber toy when he felt its head crunch in his mouth. What happened next was not so rock and roll. The concert was finished, but Ozzy had to be rushed to the hospital right after the show to begin a painful series of rabies shots, just in case the bat was sick. The story became a permanent part of his legend. You might think that biting into a bat is the weirdest thing a rock star could possibly put in their mouth. But you would be wrong. Our next story is about a Rolling Stones guitarist who claimed to have consumed something far more personal and shocking. 6. Keith Richards and his father's ashes. Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones is the definition of a rock and roll survivor. The man has lived a life so full of wild parties and close calls that it's a miracle he's still standing. He has been the subject of countless rumors over the decades, but the most shocking one came from his own mouth. The story is that after his father Bert passed away, Keith Richards took some of his ashes, mixed them with a white powder, and then snorted them. This rumor sounds like it has to be a joke, a tall tale made up to add to his outlaw image. But in his 2010 autobiography titled Life, Keith Richards himself confirmed that the story is true. He wrote that his father had been cremated, and he was holding onto the ashes in a black box for years, waiting for the right place to scatter them. One day, he opened the box to do just that, and a little bit of the ash blew out onto the table. He said he looked at the fine powder of his dad on the table and thought, "What should I do with this?" So he wiped it up with his finger and snorted it. He even added, "He was cremated, and I couldn't resist grinding him up with a little bit of blow. My dad wouldn't have cared." It's a story so bizarre and personal that it could only come from the life of a true rock and roll legend. That's a very strange way to pay tribute to a family member. But our next star was so deep into his own wild lifestyle that he almost didn't survive to tell any more stories at all. 7. Nikki Sixx's Brush with the End. The 1980s were the decade of hair metal, and Motley Crue was the king of the scene. The band was as famous for their insane partying as they was for their hit songs. The bassist, Nikki Sixx, was the main songwriter and the leader of the band's wild antics. Their lifestyle was so extreme that it almost came to a tragic end in December 1987. The rumor is that Nikki Sixx had a substance overdose so severe that his heart actually stopped beating, and he was declared without life, only to be brought back by a quick-thinking paramedic. This isn't just a rumor, it's a cornerstone of the Motley Crue legend, and it is completely true. The band tells the whole story in their famous book, The Dirt. After a night of intense partying, Nikki injected a substance and collapsed. His heart stopped for a full 2 minutes. The paramedics arrived, but they couldn't revive him. He was, for all intents and purposes, gone. But one paramedic, who happened to be a Motley Crue fan, didn't want to give up. He decided to try one last thing. He injected 2 shots of adrenaline directly into Nikki's heart. It was a long shot, but it worked. Nikki's heart started beating again. He was rushed to the hospital, but in a true rock star move, he ripped the tubes out of his body, escaped the hospital, and got a ride home from some fans, all while still wearing his leather pants. Coming back from the brink of death is a powerful story, but some rock stars were rumored to have made deals not with doctors, but with a much darker force to achieve their fame and fortune. 8. Robert Plant's Deal with the Devil. Led Zeppelin is one of the most mysterious and powerful bands in rock history. Their music was epic, and their image was shrouded in mystique and ancient symbols. Because of their fascination with folklore and mythology, a very dark rumor began to follow them around in the 1970s. The story goes that the members of the band, particularly guitarist Jimmy Page and singer Robert Plant, made a deal with the devil. They supposedly sold their souls in exchange for their incredible talent and worldwide success. This is one of the most famous rock and roll myths, but it is completely false. There is zero evidence that anyone in the band ever made such a pact. The rumor started for a few reasons. First, Jimmy Page was very interested in the occult and bought the former home of a famous occultist named Aleister Crowley. Second, fans started to claim that if you played their most famous song, Stairway to Heaven, backward, you could hear hidden satanic messages. This backward masking craze fueled the fire. The truth is, Led Zeppelin just wrote amazing songs about a wide range of topics, including myths and legends. The Deal with the Devil story was just a spooky tale that perfectly matched their powerful and mysterious music. A deal with the devil is a dark myth. Our next story also has a dark and bloody reputation, involving a different kind of deal with a different kind of creature, a poor innocent chicken. 9. Alice Cooper and the Chicken Incident. Alice Cooper is one of the original shock rockers. His shows in the late 1960s and early 70s were like live horror movies, complete with fake blood, guillotines, and electric chairs. He created a creepy character and built a whole theatrical world around it. One of the most famous and disgusting rumors that ever followed him was that during a concert in 1969, he bit the head off a live chicken and drank its liquid on stage. This story spread like wildfire and helped make Alice Cooper a household name, feared by parents everywhere. But the story, as people tell it, is false. Here's what really happened. The concert was at the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival Festival. Someone in the audience threw a live chicken onto the stage. Alice, who grew up in the city of Detroit, had never been around farm animals. He said he figured that since the chicken had wings, it could fly. So he picked it up and tossed it back into the crowd, expecting it to soar away. Instead, the crowd in the front rows tore the poor bird to pieces. The next day, the newspapers were all reporting that Alice Cooper himself had performed a horrible act on the chicken. His manager told him not to deny it, saying the controversy was great for his image. So while a chicken did meet a terrible end at his show, Alice Cooper himself was not the one who did the deed. Tossing something into the crowd is one thing, but our next rock star became famous for showing the crowd a part of himself that they were definitely not expecting to see. 10. Angus Young mooning the audience. The band AC/DC is pure, simple, high-voltage rock and roll. At the center of their electrifying stage show is lead guitarist Angus Young, a man who performs in a schoolboy uniform and plays his guitar with the energy of a lightning strike. One of his signature moves, especially in the band's early days, was to turn his back to the audience, drop his shorts, and show them his bare backside. This act of mooning the crowd became a legendary part of their concerts. So is this just a funny story, or did it really happen? It is 100% true. Back in the 1970s, when AC/DC was just starting out in Australia, they were a raw and rowdy bar band. The mooning started as a way to get a reaction from tough crowds who weren't paying attention. It was a rebellious, in-your-face move that perfectly matched their music. As the band got bigger and started playing in arenas, the mooning became a beloved ritual. There is plenty of old concert footage and photos that show Angus carrying on the tradition. It was a cheeky and playful way to show the band's rebellious spirit and to give the audience a little something extra to remember. Showing off your backside is one thing, but the behavior of our next musician was far from playful and landed him in a world of serious legal trouble for his truly awful actions. 11. Rick James and the kidnapping incident. Rick James was a superstar in the late 70s and early 80s, a master of funk music who crossed over into the rock scene. He was known for his hit song Super Freak and his wild, flamboyant lifestyle. But his life took a very dark turn in the 1990s. A horrifying rumor began to circulate that Rick James and his girlfriend had kidnapped a woman, held her against her will for several days, and subjected her to terrible abuse. This is not a rock and roll myth. This is a horrifyingly true story. In 1991, James and his girlfriend, Tanya Hijazi, forced a young woman to come to his home in Hollywood. Over the course of several days, they held her captive and committed terrible acts of violence against her. To make matters even worse, while he was out on bail for this crime, he assaulted another woman in a hotel room. The details that came out during his trial were disturbing and showed a pattern of violent behavior fueled by his substance abuse problems. In the end, he was convicted for the crimes and was sentenced to serve more than 5 years in prison. It was a shocking and tragic fall from grace for a once beloved music icon. The story of Rick James is a dark one involving terrible choices. Our next story is also about a rock star who made a terrible choice that resulted in a tragic accident and the end of another musician's life. 12. Vince Neil's fatal car crash. In the mid-1980s, Motley Crue was on top of the world. They were the poster boys for the Sunset Strip hair metal scene, living a life of non-stop partying. But in December 1984, that party came to a screeching halt. The story goes that the band's lead singer, Vince Neil, got into a serious car accident while driving under the influence, and the crash resulted in the passing of his passenger, Nicholas Razzle Dingley, the drummer of the band Hanoi Rocks. This is another rock and roll story that is sadly and completely true. Vince Neil was hosting a party at his home in California. They ran out of adult beverages, so he and Razzle decided to make a quick trip to the liquor store. Neil was behind the wheel of his fancy sports car, driving way too fast on a wet road. He lost control of the car, swerved into oncoming traffic, and collided with another vehicle. The two people in the other car were seriously injured. Razzle Dingley was pronounced gone at the hospital. He was only 24 years old. Vince Neil was arrested and charged. In a decision that many people found very controversial, he only served 15 days in jail and had to pay a fine and do community service. The incident had a lasting impact on both bands and is considered one of the darkest moments in 80s rock history. A fatal accident is a heavy burden to carry. Our next story involves another member of Motley Crue and a violent incident that happened inside his own home involving his famous wife. 13. Tommy Lee's assault on Pamela Anderson. Motley Crue's drummer Tommy Lee has always been in the public eye, not just for his drumming, but for his turbulent personal life. His marriage to actress and model Pamela Anderson in the mid-90s was a constant source of tabloid headlines. They were a famous and volatile couple, and their relationship came to a dramatic and violent end. The rumor is that in 1998, Tommy Lee physically assaulted Pamela Anderson in their home while she was holding their young son. This is another disturbing story from the Motley Crue camp that is entirely true. According to the police report, an argument broke out between the couple in their kitchen. The fight escalated, and Lee attacked Anderson, leaving her with bruises and a torn fingernail. She called the police, and Tommy Lee was arrested. He pleaded no contest to the charges, which is a way of accepting the punishment without formally admitting guilt. He was sentenced to serve 6 months in county jail. The incident led to their divorce and became a major public scandal. It was a sad and public example of how a glamorous rock and roll lifestyle can hide some very dark and serious problems at home. The stories of Motley Crue are full of bad decisions and legal troubles. Our next story is about the original bad boy rock and roll band, the Rolling Stones, and the mysterious passing of one of their founding members. 14. The mysterious passing of Brian Jones. Brian Jones was the founder of the Rolling Stones. In the early days, he was the band's leader, a talented musician who could play almost any instrument, but as the band got more famous, his personal problems and substance abuse issues grew worse. By 1969, he was no longer able to contribute to the band, and the other members made the difficult decision to fire him. Just a month later, Brian Jones was found at the bottom of his swimming pool, no longer breathing. The official cause was listed as death by misadventure, but a persistent rumor has always claimed that it wasn't an accident and that he was actually taken out by someone. This is one of rock's greatest unsolved mysteries, and the rumor remains unverified. Here's what is known. On the night he passed, Jones had a few people over to his house, including a builder named Frank Thorogood. The story is that Jones and Thorogood had been arguing over money. Theories have persisted for decades that Thorogood was responsible for Jones's passing, possibly holding him underwater until he drowned. It's even been claimed that Frank Thorogood made a deathbed confession years later, but this has never been proven. The police have reopened the case a couple of times over the years, but have never found enough evidence to change the official ruling. So while many people believe there was foul play, the official story remains that it was a tragic accident. A mysterious end is one thing, but what about a musician who was known for stealing from his own bandmates to support his habits? Our next story takes us into the chaotic world of punk rock. 15. Sid Vicious, stealing from his bandmates. The S-Pistols were the most notorious band of the punk rock movement in the 1970s. They were loud, obnoxious, and rebellious. Their bassist, Sid Vicious, couldn't really play his instrument, but he had the perfect punk look and attitude. He was the embodiment of the band's chaotic energy. However, he also had a very serious problem with illicit substances. A persistent rumor claims that his habit was so bad that he would often resort to stealing money from his own bandmates to pay for his next fix. According to the other members of the band, especially lead singer Johnny Rotten, this rumor is definitely true. In his books and interviews, Johnny has talked about how frustrating it was to have Sid in the band. He said that Sid's life was completely taken over by his addiction. He would often be too out of it to perform properly, and he would do anything to get money. Johnny described how the band's earnings would often go missing, and it was always clear that Sid was the one responsible. It created a lot of tension and was one of the many reasons the band imploded after only a couple of years together. Sid's story is a tragic one, a cautionary tale about a young man who became a punk icon but couldn't escape his own personal demons. Stealing from your friends is a low blow. Our next rock star wasn't known for stealing, but he was known for being incredibly close with a staggering number of his female fans. 16. Bret Michaels and his thousands of partners. The band Poison was one of the biggest glam metal bands of the 1980s. Their lead singer, Bret Michaels, was the ultimate rock and roll frontman, with his long blonde hair, bandana, and high-energy stage presence. Like many rock stars of that era, he had a reputation as a serious ladies' man. But Bret Michaels took that reputation to another level. The rumor, which he started himself, is that over the course of his career, he has had intimate relations with thousands and thousands of women. Believe it or not, Bret Michaels himself claims this is true. In his autobiography, he made the stunning claim that he had been with over 3,000 different partners. To put that in perspective, that would be like being with a new person every single day for Justo, over 8 years. He said that the touring lifestyle of the 80s and 90s was a non-stop party, and he fully embraced the attention he received from female fans, often referred to as groupies. While the exact number is impossible to verify, the claim itself speaks to the absolute excess and wildness of that era in rock music. It was a time when rock stars were treated like gods, and for many of them, there were no limits. Being with thousands of partners is a wild claim. But what about a rock star whose romantic life involved getting involved with a girl who was only 13 years old when he was a grown man? Our next story is a controversial one. 17. David Bowie's relationship with a teenager. David Bowie was a musical chameleon, a true artist who changed his look and sound many times throughout his long career. In the early 1970s, during his Ziggy Stardust phase, he was one of the biggest and most controversial stars on the planet. Around this time, a story emerged that he was involved in a romantic relationship with a very young fan named Lori Maddox, who was only 13 or 14 years old at the time. This is a very uncomfortable story, but based on interviews with Lori Maddox herself, it is true. She has spoken publicly about her time in the rock and roll scene of the 70s. She said she became a famous baby groupie and met David Bowie in 1972. She claims they began an affair that lasted for a while. In today's world, a relationship between an adult rock star in his mid-20s and a young teenager would cause a massive scandal and lead to serious legal consequences. But back in the 1970s, the culture around rock music was very different, and things like this were often overlooked or even seen as part of the rebellious lifestyle. It remains one of the more disturbing and controversial chapters in David Bowie's life story. A controversial relationship is one thing, but what about a relationship that happens inside the band itself, causing so much drama that it fuels one of the greatest albums of all time? 18. Stevie Nicks and the Lighting Tech. The band Fleetwood Mac is almost as famous for their internal drama as they are for their classic songs. The making of their 1977 album, Rumors, is the stuff of legend. At the time, the two couples in the band were breaking up and everyone was writing songs about each other. But there's another layer to the drama. The rumor is that during this incredibly tense time, singer Stevie Nicks had a secret affair with the band's lighting director, a man named Curry Grant. This piece of the rumors puzzle is absolutely true. While Stevie Nicks and her longtime boyfriend and bandmate, Lindsey Buckingham, were going through a messy breakup, Stevie found comfort in the arms of someone else on the tour. The affair was a secret at first, but it's hard to keep secrets when you're all living and working together so closely. This secret romance added even more fuel to the emotional fire that was burning within the band. In fact, one of the songs on the album, Silver Springs, is said to be partially inspired by the feelings and fallout from this period. It just goes to show that all the pain, heartbreak, and secret affairs that were tearing the band apart personally were also the very things that helped them create their most successful and beloved album.